And he's back. He is no longer a guest. He's just part of the rotation. Anytime that I can't get the starting pitcher to go 7, I got to go to the bullpen. And I know that's a baseball reference on a fantasy football podcast, but he's back. He's my buddy. He's going to help me get through the mobile quarterback edition of the 3-team parlay. Kyle from the Fantasy Football Smackdown. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, man, it's good to be back. I'm glad that Jerry needs 5 days rest after every start, so that I keep getting the opportunity to come on here with you.
Yeah, the bonus show for a half an hour on Monday on the Scott Fishbowl Podathon about putting him in the podcast hospital. So, but yeah, I soldier on. It was too short a notice for the new doctor, Dr. Kyle, but that's all right, man. How are things going over at the Smackdown? Everything going well?
Yeah, it's been good, man. You helped me kick that thing off. You're my first guest about a month ago. We've had some fantastic guests following you and Jerry. So it's been good. I'm at 5 or 6 episodes in. Just keep rolling one a week, just talking some evergreen content right now. This is kind of a good time to rebrand, just because I can kind of talk some general topics. We're covering a lot of things regarding like league types, things that I'd encourage people to try out new. So we're going to be covering that a little bit more in depth again next week. So it's been a lot of fun, man. So I do love podcasting. So whenever you shoot up the bat signal, I got to hop on that.
Yeah, it's been great. And tonight's kind of some evergreen topics as well, because we're just breaking down these teams. And luckily we haven't done the Patriots yet, because that's been the only team in the last couple of months to make any real major moves with the addition of Cam Newton. I know that we'll get those guys on one of the last 3 weeks that we have coming up. But, man, what a great time to have you on the mobile quarterback edition. So tonight we're going to be covering Baltimore and Lamar Jackson. We're going to be covering Buffalo and Josh Allen. And we're going to be covering Arizona with Kyler. So I didn't plan it that way. I was just taking a team from the top third, the middle third, and the bottom third from the scoring format. But, man, that's kind of how it worked out. And you're going to see some common themes throughout these teams. Let's get right into it. Baltimore last year, just will not surprise anybody, was first in points scored per game with 33.2. Now, Vegas, courtesy of the people over at the Action Network, they're anticipating this team to win 11.5 games. So to cash that over, you got to hit 12. Now, they did win 14 last year, but we'll see how they handle a first-place schedule this year. They are returning 81.7% of their 2019 offensive snaps. So that's the 10th most in the league. And then let's break down the plays. So they were 7th in total plays on offense with 1,064. They were 2nd in total yardage, which shouldn't surprise anybody, with 6,521 yards. They were 32nd in pass attempts, dead stinking last. But when you're running the score up on everybody, you really don't have to pass the ball a lot. They only threw the ball 440 times, which was good for 27th in total pass yards of 32.25. These next two stats should surprise absolutely no one. They were first in rush attempts with 596, almost 100 more rush attempts than the team in second. And they were first in rushing yards with 3,000, we'll call it 3,300. It's right there. And that was 1,000 more rush yards than the team that finished second. This team was bananas in 2019. Who is new? J.K. Dobbins, rookie running back out of Ohio State. Devin Duvernay, 3rd-round wide receiver. And James Prochet, a 6th-round wide receiver. Who's gone? Nobody really on the offensive side of the ball of merit, with the exception of Hayden Hurst, who got traded to Atlanta. And they did lose. I added this guy because he's such a difference maker for this team, or was, and that was Marshall Yanda, just an all-pro, all-world offensive lineman. Now, they drafted some offensive linemen to put in that place, but it's a big difference to go from a plug-and-play all-pro to a couple of new guys. So that's going to be one of the more interesting things in the run game. I'm just going to go right to my guest. Kyle, we usually just go around position by position, so we'll let you start with Lamar. Is he a stock up, a stock down? And I know you're a redraft specialist from the podcast world, but you do play a fair bit of Dynasty, including Superflex. So What is he for you? Is he up, down? Is he a neutral? Is he a buy, a sell? What's going on with Lamar?
Yeah, I did count it up the other day because I was kind of mapping out how many leagues I was going to have, figuring out how many more I can add. And I'm pretty sure that this is going to be 30-year run, and I'm going to have more dynasty than redraft leagues. I added a few more dynasty leagues, so it's the way to play, man. It's a ton of fun. But for Lamar, his stock isn't going to get any higher than what he's coming off of, in my opinion. I mean, 36 passing touchdowns is an insane number. His efficiency there, only 6 picks, so not penalized if you're in leagues that that hit you big for those inaccuracies as far as turning the ball over. Rushing the ball out of this world, 1,200 yards, just crazy. And it's something we've never seen before. And there's reason for that. I do think that over the long haul, Lamar is going to have to. He's going to have to eventually turn into, a more efficient passer. Just overall, like you said, the team was dead last in pass attempts. I'm not sure they can run the ball 180 times a year with Lamar Jackson and expect him to hold up. But in the short term, I still think he's going to produce at a high level. He's going to be, that top 1-2 QB over the next couple years. But if you're in a position, obviously if you're a contender, I'll just hang on to it, one in the hand. But I was in a league this last year, this last offseason, where I had Lamar Jackson. It was a super flex league, so obviously really valuable. But I took a look. I'm like, this team is just not a contender. So I ended up flipping him, and I got your boy Terry McLaurin in that deal, and I got three first rounders for him. So I think I could have kicked back a second, but whatever, didn't matter. I was like, this sets my team up for success. So I turned one of those picks into J.K. Dobbins. I've turned another one of those picks into Cam Akers late in that draft. I mean, I needed running backs, so I'm in a much better spot, than where I was. So he's a sell, overall, just because I think you're selling high, and that's always what you're looking to do. But I'm not scared of him, in the short term for sure. I mean, he's my QB2 in redraft leagues. I think just he's a guy that is going to always give you a safe floor no matter what due to that rushing. That's not going to go away 100%. But it's going to be hard to replicate as well what he did last season.
Yeah, so I always write down notes for myself as I'm, statting these guys out. I said he's a hold, but I'll listen.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. The guy had 416 fantasy points last year in ESPN basic 4-point per passing touchdown scoring. So even if you shave 20% off this monster, he's still the QB2 overall last year. So that would have allowed Russell Wilson to have slid just ahead of him in that scoring format. And I think a 20% regression gives you a pretty big cushion. But here's the thing. You can get Russell Wilson plus for this guy. You can get Deshaun Watson plus for this guy. Can he repeat 176 rushes and stay healthy?
Right.
And, I mean, if he was a running back, he did finish 6th in the league in total rushing. It's bananas.
Yeah.
But I just believe that there is some serious regression coming. I mean, he threw a touchdown on 1 out of every 9 pass attempts. So for every 9 times he dropped back, one of those 9 was a touchdown. That is scary. I think in Matt Ryan's MVP season, he was, throwing at a 7% clip. Mm-hmm. So there's some regression. Again, they're playing a first-place schedule. They're going to play the Chiefs again. They're going to play the Patriots, which I know they're down, but we don't know what they're going to look like with Cam Newton. They're going to play the Texans again. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they played Pittsburgh twice. I think we all believe that Cleveland's defense is for real. Cleveland was one of the teams who beat them last year. So for me, for Lamar, it's just about what I get in return in a dynasty league. If I can get Deshaun Watson plus something substantial, I'm going to listen. If I can get Russell Wilson plus maybe a rookie running back that I like or someone else, I'm not going to be afraid because I've always been a prove it to me kind of owner. I want to see it. I want to see it a couple of years. And then this year, if he bombs, then what? And I'm not saying he's going to bomb. That's not the point. But he had this monster last year. And then if he bombs this year, what are we going to say? Well, let's give it a third year to see who he really is. Mm-hmm. And by that point, who knows? So I really like him. I like the fact that there's so much room for regression and still having a solid asset. But when you're going anywhere from 1 to 4 in a Superflex startup, I've got to listen. So for me, he is a hold unless someone comes through with what we like to call a Godfather offer. I'll go ahead and hit a couple of the 3 running backs. Mark Ingram, for me, he is a stock down sell. He's age 30, and he's played 9 seasons in the league. Now, he's played all 16 games 3 times. He has missed 1 to 5 games 6 of his 9 years. He's coming off 202 attempts last year. So if you take Ingram's 202 and Jackson's 176, that still leaves over 200 total rushes for the other running backs on the team. So there's no reason why he couldn't have another borderline running back 1 season like he did last year. My concern in this offense is that all the running backs combined last year had 51 targets and 41 catches. Christian McCaffrey calls that 2 Sundays. Done. Done and done. Just moving on. And at some point, we talked about Marshall Yonda being gone. So unless you're a serious contender, I'm looking to move him.
Yeah.
Because at some point he's going to be supplanted by J.K. Dobbins, who I love. I have him as a neutral from where he was going anywhere from – you did a lot of rookie drafts, Kyle, and both Superflex and 1 QB. He was going between 105 and 108. He kind of like DeAndre Swift is the one that I really want. Because, again, you can give Lamar Jackson every rush he had last year, and you can give Mark Ingram every rush he had last year. And if he just takes Gus Edwards' share from last year, did you know Gus Edwards had 133 rushes in this offense last year?
Yeah.
Dobbins is going to have value this year, and I think people are sleeping on him. Dobbins went 3 rounds later than Jonathan Taylor and DeAndre Swift in my Scott Fishbowl draft. So people are not, I don't say down on him, they're just not super high, especially in like a tournament format like Scott Fishbowl and in redraft. So he is someone I'm looking to buy because I think he can be productive this year. For me, the Justice Hill experiment and the Gus bust, one of these guys ain't going to be on the team in September more than likely. I don't see them carrying 4 running backs. So for me, Ingram's stock down, sell, unless you're a real contender and need the depth. Dobbins is a buy in all formats. And then Hill and Gus, they can take the bus. Kyle, where are you at with these 4 running backs?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on Ingram. When you just look at the numbers from last year without even factoring in, like you said, I think the potential for a breakdown due to injury, the potential to a downturn in opportunity with them bringing in Dobbins, who is just perfect, for this offense. Ingram has some natural regression from the standpoint of he had 10 rushing touchdowns on only 200 attempts. He had 5 receiving touchdowns on 26 catches. That's just not going to happen. I expect Jackson's touchdown numbers overall passing to come down from the 36. I think that Ingram's number is an obvious one to take a hit. I think he could be closer, obviously to closer to 1 or 2 even than where he was last season. The only thing that I'll say with Ingram, and I agree with you on what you said from a dynasty standpoint for sure. I think the only thing that might play into the favor if you're trying to move Ingram is the idea of selling him to a contender, kind of pairing it with the thought process of teams might get off to a slower start, mainly players that are trying to get integrated. So if you can say, hey, I can sell you Ingram, he's going to get you through that first, 4 or 5 weeks. I think that's a totally reasonable thing to buy if you're a contender, knowing that like, hey, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to come out of this in a good shape after the first month record-wise, knowing that I can plug Ingram here and kind of Band-Aid a little bit while the rest of my team's coming together. Now, I'm not overpaying for him by any means, and I'm not paying the price if someone's trying to get, RB1, low-end RB1 profit for him, even at age 30. But I do think in this environment, he's going to be a guy that should get off to a decent start as they're integrating Dobbins into the offense. So I do think Dobbins long-term is going to be the guy. I actually took Mark Ingram relatively late in Scott Fish compared to where I thought he was going to go. I have fingers crossed by the time this comes out. They're hopefully to God I'll be at my pick, but I have Dobbins queued up for the next round. I really considered him going back to back, but I think Ingram could be a short-term solution if you're looking on a contender, and you should be able to get him fairly cheap if you can. Dobbins, though, is the beast, man. I think he's perfect for this offense. There's going to be a great situation for him for a long time. He was my running back 3. I like Swift a lot. I ended up with Swift on more teams in Dynasty rookie drafts just because of where I was. But I think Dobbins, he's in a safe situation as far as he's on a team that is going to stay intact for a while. That was the thing that tipped the scale for me, Dobbins or Swift, because Swift is in a situation where they could blow that whole thing away in a year. As far as the coaching staff goes, hopefully not, but it could happen. So I really like Dobbins. He's definitely somebody I'd love to get on my team. Love to get a guy that's going to be paired with Lamar Jackson. There's enough to go around, like you said, so I'm not concerned like I am maybe in other scenarios where the quarterback could vulture. Dobbins is an absolute beast. So those are your guys those are guys for sure. There's going to be enough to go around, and I think they're both going to have value in 2020. Just kind of like you said, kind of sunset for Ingram, and I think Dobbins will take over in 2020. I think that's kind of been a consensus.
If you were a non-contending Ingram owner and someone offered you a 2021 second, would you take it?
I would.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's fair value. I mean, as the buyer, as the seller, I mean, we know with COVID, there's going to be need for extra running backs as a contender. And this might be the year that you may have to pay up for a veteran. So why not go ahead and get you one now?
Yeah.
If you got a good RB room, but it's a thin RB room, you know, why not add a guy that you know is going to be in a very potent offense? I'm sorry to cut you off. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say, and even though Nat, obviously, it's going to be a later second because it's from a contending team, if you're getting their pick. But I think even if you, like you said, Gus Edwards had 133 attempts last year. What if that's Ingram's role? Like, I do think that if you're a contender and you're in the position of buying him, giving up that second, I think he's going to be pretty solid the first 4 to 6 weeks. And even after that, I still think if you're in a deeper league, we actually talked about this when we were when we did the running back tandem show, just the idea of being able to play 2 running backs from an offense. If you're in a deeper league, Ingram is still going to be somebody you can probably start because he's going to get some work, even if Dobbins does take over, I think, as long as he's healthy. And that might be Baltimore's way to do that, is to, slide him into that 150 range as opposed to getting close to that 200, 210 range for carries.
And if you remember, Mark Ingram got hurt down the stretch. So there's no point in a team that has Super Bowl aspirations to overly exert either dude. I mean, let's jump into this wide receiver room. I love me some Hollywood Brown. I mean, here's the thing. I know a lot of people, especially if you're not a gym rat like me, people are sick of the guys, working out in a pair of shorts with just a helmet on, looking jacked. But I think it's great. There's so many more distractions out there in this COVID world. They could be sitting on the couch smoking weed, eating a cheeseburger, but yeah, here he is every day working on getting better at his craft. Why would you hate that? Just ignore it. Just unfollow him on Instagram. Who cares? I would much rather know that like him and Cam Newton and all these guys are out there doing 3-cone drills and what's your boy CeeDee Lamb with the Cowboys out there running routes on air in his backyard. Again, there's so many things that he could be doing, but that tells me he loves football. He loves his craft. And he's trying to get better. For me, he's a hold because his stock is up, but he's starting to gain so much steam and his ADP is moving that he's pricing himself out of my comfort zone. Even though I believe he is the one in this offense, I do worry about his overall volume. So is he more of a best ball? Is he like a wide receiver 3 that can win you a week? You put in a Kenny Galladay at your 1, you put in a Cooper Kupp at your 2, and then you put in a guy like Marquise Brown as your wide receiver 3. Hello, that's money because he may get you 5 or he may get you 35. And if he gets you that 35, you probably win your week. So that's where I like him, but his ADP is not going to allow you to have that luxury if you're acquiring him in a startup. Other guys on the team from the wide receiver position, they drafted 92nd overall, 5'11", Devin Duvernay. He's a neutral hold. We kind of don't know what this wide receiver core is going to be beyond Hollywood Brown. And the other guy they brought in this year in the draft is James Prochet. He was a 6th-round rookie. He's 6 feet tall. But then the reason why I'm mentioning height is because the guy that I'm trying to buy low-key, because he's not redundant from a height standpoint, that's Miles Boykin. That's Kyle's former co-host, Seth's boy.
Yes.
Seth McKinley loved him, some Miles Boykin last year. I mean, the guy also had 3rd-round draft capital. Ironically, they drafted him 93rd in 2019, and then they drafted Duvernay 92nd in 2020. But this guy's 6'4". He's the non-Smurf on this team. He could be a red zone weapon. He is someone I'm very intrigued with. He didn't come out of the most, and it wasn't a bad offense, but it wasn't like offensively prolific in Notre Dame, where he came out. Neither was the quarterback play. My whole fear for this entire wide receiver room is that there's not a lot of volume. Lamar Jackson himself personally only threw the ball 401 times last year. That ain't a lot, now, especially when you divide that number by 16. I mean, that's not even 30 times a game. So then then he completes 60%. Okay, let's say that's 30. Well, he just completed 24 passes. Where's that going? It's not a lot to divvy up. They always say a lot of mouths to feed, which is a cliche, but there's still 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a couple of running backs, and you're trying to whack up 24 catches. That's not a lot of volume for anybody. So that's my fear. I do like Hollywood Brown. I'm a little concerned about his ADP creeping up, but I think this is a very needs to prove at wide receiver room. Where are you at with these wide receivers, Kyle?
Yeah, for me, you touched on it. The biggest thing is just the volume. I just don't trust that there's enough to go around where these guys can be fantasy relevant. Marquise Brown obviously is super fun to watch. We saw it in his action last year: 46 receptions, 7 touchdowns. I mean, holy crap, right? This guy is obviously a burner. He's super exciting to watch, and somebody that, if I had a share of, if I picked him up at his draft price last year, in the rookie draft, he was definitely very reasonable. Somebody that you were probably, slotting in, to your team already. I dig that. You mentioned his ADP. For me, he's just one of those guys that it's tough for me to own them, when he is, these guys that are just kind of, take the deep shots. They'll have some big games, but he's volatile, right? So he's not going to be a heavy volume guy in this offense. He could be. I think he's really talented. But in this offense, like you said, there's just not enough targets to go around, not enough catches to go around. And he's creeping into that range where you have to take him as a more of a high-end wide receiver 3. And I don't like that as much. I will usually take somebody else. A lot of the guys, I know he went in again, it's not Dynasty, but it's fresh on our minds. Like he went right around where DJ Chark was going, Tyler Boyd went in that range. Like those are guys I really like. I still like Brandon Cooks. I think he's going to be somebody that bounces back this year. So as far as just like the value right now, Brown has just outpriced himself for me. And really any receiver in this offense is going to be one that I'm going to have a tough time buying into. So it'll be just one of those situations where if you want a piece, get the cheapest guy. I think, any of those other 3 guys are obviously far cheaper, and I'm okay, like you said, taking with Boykin because he does something different. But I'm not really targeting any of these guys necessarily, just due to the fact that I don't think Lamar in the very near future is going to be approaching that even 500 pass attempts. I think it's going to continue to be a pretty low volume passing offense.
Well, I went and did the math while you were reciting some nice things there, and at 401,
That's a nice way to put that.
Hey, 401 pass attempts divided by his 15 games that he played last year averages 27 attempts a game. He completed 64.4 passes per game, or that was his completion percentage. That's 17 completions a game. So now my math was off to the point to where now we've got 3 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and the running back. So that's anywhere from 6 to 7 guys trying to whack up 17 receptions, man. It ain't good. Yeah. Which is another reason why my final guy on this team to cover is Mark Andrews.
Willie Snead. Oh, damn.
Willie. I wish I had the Conor McGregor thing, and this was not a family-friendly show. Anyway. Yeah, you got to be careful with those, bud.
Yes.
Mark Andrews. I mean, the guy was a monster last year, but again, volume. So much like him, I put his stock as about a neutral for me because he is the tight end 3-4, depending on where you get your rankings. Mm-hmm. And I said, but I'll listen. If I can get Zach Ertz plus for Mark Andrews, if I can spend the age narrative, I'll move him. This is never going to be a volume offense. Could he be the George Kittle of this team? Sure he could. But even if the volume goes up 20%, I mean, again, 20% is it's 1/5. It's a good chunk of movement. And if you add 20% to 17, I mean, you're adding 3.5. So now you have 20 completions a game. It doesn't really, get me too hot and bothered. So if I could get a TJ Hawkinson plus like a 21 first for Mark Andrews, he gonna ship him. Yeah. Just moving him on down the road. I like him. I like the skill set. He was a good tight end for Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. But for me, what are the 2 things we're always looking for, Kyle? We're looking for volume and we're looking for value. As we just proved mathematically, there's not a lot of volume in this offense. And he's now to the point as the tight end 3-4 in a startup. He's no longer a value. So he's someone I would much rather get the next big thing or take a shot and try to move off of him. What about you with Andrews? And then when you finish with Andrews, just go ahead and tell me if you're up, down, or neutral on this offense as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Andrews is definitely my favorite target as far as the pass catchers go. I think that if you're looking to buy him, though, you missed your value opportunity. It's gone. It was last year. And with his numbers, 10 touchdowns again, like that's going to be tough to replicate in this offense. I think overall it's going to come down. I do think he's the leading receiver on this team. He definitely has a really good skill set. He led like the top end tight ends yards per reception. because he was only, I had it here, he was 7th among tight ends in receptions, one more than Jason Witten, which is just weird to say. But this is a guy that, did it on not a ton of volume. He wasn't in the uber elite category of like where we saw from Kelsey and what we've seen from Ertz and Kittle and Waller last year. I think if you're a tight end away from contending and you don't want to completely sell the farm, I love Zach Ertz right now as far as where his value is at. He's a guy that for some reason still had a solid year last year. He has Dallas Goedert there, but there's enough targets to go around in that offense with less mouths to feed, and they're going to throw the ball more. So Andrews is somebody I'm really happy if he's on my team because you got him for cheap, more than likely, whether it was in the draft or picking him up in trade last year. And I'm happy with that, but I'm not going out and necessarily paying the current price on him. I do think he's the best receiving option in this offense, but I'm not buying him. If I have him, I'm probably holding, like you said. I'll listen to offers for sure because if I can upgrade it and still get some on the side, or stay neutral and get some on the side. But it's a tough one, man, because this offense, like we just keep saying, it's going to be lower passing volume. So as an offense as a whole, though, man, I'm probably, you say up, down, or neutral.
Yep.
I'm probably a little bit more neutral than most. There's some super exciting players on here, obviously between Jackson and Andrews, but I think those guys are due for a little bit of regression. Ingram is still a question mark, and so it would probably be down, except for the fact that I really like J.K. Dobbins. I think he's going to be super exciting and somebody that in 2021 and forward is going to be awesome, man. You're going to love having him on your roster. So you might have to suffer through a first half of this season, but then it's going to pop. So I guess I'm probably more neutral than some. I think they're going to produce at a high level. They're definitely going to be at the top end of the league, but to be number one again, it's going to be tough. Other coaches get paid too, right? So I don't know why no one watched that Chargers film from that playoff game, 2 years ago, but I think they figure them out just a bit where it slides them back just a tick.
Yeah, for me, slightly down. I mean, there's only one place to go when you're at the tippy top.
Yeah.
And that's down. In my opinion, they got pretty lucky last year. Is it related to injuries? Ingram missed one game. Jackson missed one game due to being benched because they already had everything locked up. 176 rushes for a guy Lamar Jackson size and to not have any injuries, whether that be an injury caused by collision or just like a soft tissue, it kind of feels like they were walking between raindrops. So for me, I have to lean slightly down. But we're going to pivot to another team that if I had asked you, Kyle, where did you think the Buffalo Bills finished last year in points per game? Did they finish in the top third, the middle third, or the bottom third?
I would have said the bottom third.
Well, you would have been correct barely. They were 23rd overall last year in points per game with 19.6. I think people underestimate how good that defense really is.
Yeah.
And this year's Vegas over and under total on this team is 9 wins, and I think that's about perfect. I think that's one that if you wanted to bet it either way, if you got the full number, I wouldn't mess with this at like 9.5, 8.5. But I kind of feel like 9's a free roll. I feel like if you're going to bet 9, whichever way you go, I mean, you have to make your own determination based on the schedule. But I feel like it lands on 9 more often than not, and you wind up getting a push. So
do you think 9 wins the division?
It's going to be close. I think
Yeah.
New England obviously is going to regress back to the pack.
Yeah.
The one thing Buffalo has going for them, so I've been adding this consistency and returning snap count from last year from an ESPN article, and Buffalo is returning 95.4% of its 2019 offensive snaps. So that's the most in the NFL. The only person that they really lost of any real significance is Frank Gore. So that's pretty impressive. So with continuity and COVID and, just knowing each other, your tendencies and everything, that's going to mean a bunch. They were 16th in total plays last year with 1,018. They were 24th in total yardage with 5,283. 24th in pass attempts. Obviously, this is a rushing team. They finished 24th with 513. They finished 26th in passing yards with 2,229. And then, much like a lot of these teams, this was a rushing team. They were 6th in total rushes with 465. And they were 8th in rush yards with 2,054. Who's gone? Another Seth McKinley favorite, the Infinity Stone, Frank Gore, unstoppable, now in division rival New York Jets. Who's new? Stephon Diggs, Zach Moss from the rookie draft, and Gabriel Davis, wide receiver, also from the rookie draft. All right, Mr. Kyle, let's start with Josh Allen. Can he continue to improve? Is he an up, down, neutral, buy or sell for you?
Man, Allen is so interesting because I didn't recognize it when you shot me the list of teams we were talking about, but this definitely is the running quarterback show. He's so much different than Jackson just because we have not seen the passing numbers anywhere even close to what even Jackson did last year. I mean, just 20 touchdowns last year, over pretty much a little more than a season and a half. Josh Allen has 30 passing touchdowns, 17 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he needs that rushing production to put up fantasy numbers. It comes down to purely that. He does run a decent amount as far as attempts go, but he just doesn't have the yardage that Lamar has, per attempt. Especially that's what we saw last year. So I'm further down on Allen, just because I think last year was another really good year of rushing production as far as 9 touchdowns. I mean, that's even with as much opportunity they give him, I still think 6 or maybe closer to 5 or 6 is a little bit more reasonable number to expect. And I just don't trust the passing to ever really come around. Hopefully it does. Adding Stephon Diggs is nice. But as far as right now, I think I'm going to take the chance that we just saw hit one of his better seasons. Then I think then he's going to get much better. I'm okay leaving if I need to, but again, just my philosophy on Dynasty as a whole. So I don't want to sound like I'm riding the fence, but like, it definitely depends. Like if I'm a contender, I don't mind selling him to upgrade a little bit, but I'm not just going to do it just to do it. But I would say I'm down on Josh Allen. I just think that rushing touchdowns are going to be tough. It's been 2 years, but I don't know, man. I don't know if I trust it. And with no passing as the floor, it's rough. So I'm going to go down on Allen.
All right. For me, he's a hold to a sell. I'm diversifying. Now, I was the guy in Superflex 2 years ago that was getting this guy in the late second, early third everywhere. Mm-hmm. But now I wouldn't. I'm not saturated in a bad way because I wasn't drafting him super high in startups. I was getting him dirt cheap in rookie drafts, and now it's time to cash in some of that in case the volume and the value revert back to zero. But here's what I see. So I remember hearing interviews with this kid's coach, which is Jordan Palmer. That's Carson Palmer's brother. And they talk about how relentless and hardworking this kid is. So all he did last year was picked up his passing attempts from 320 as a rookie to 460 in year 2. And his completion percentage went from 52.8 to 58.8. So he improved by over 10% year over year. He went from, we'll call it 2,100 yards to 3,100 yards. Now, he did play more games. His touchdowns doubled from 10 to 20 in the air. His interceptions went down to 9 in all 16 games. So his interception percentage of passes thrown was cut in half. He had 146 first downs, which was about 57 more than his rookie year. I mean, every metric on him basically across the board went up. His QB rating went from 67.9 to 85.3. I mean, he made a tremendous improvement as a passer. Now, if he can even make that big of a stride again this year, now I'm not going to call for another 1,000 yards to 4,100 and 30 touchdowns. I wouldn't be mad because I'm still going to have my shares. But he's a fascinating guy, and I don't think there's any substitute for hard work. But at some point, his skills are going to be maximized, no matter how hard he works and no matter how much coaching he has. But I like the fact that they continue to invest around him. He's on a rookie deal, so he's not going anywhere. So for Dynasty, he's a hold. But if you're saturated, but if you have him as like your QB2 and in some cases QB3, if you listened to me 2 years ago and got him cheap, he's not a bad guy. But it's also not a bad time to diversify and cash out. So for me, his value is neutral. But I wouldn't mind if you've got him across 3 or 4 leagues. It might be time to do something different. It might be time to kick tires on other guys that I like Daniel Jones, like Jimmy Garoppolo. Some of those more classic, higher volume offensive quarterbacks. Were you gonna?
I was just gonna say. I think the big thing too for me is like if you're in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, like usually I don't even that doesn't really make a huge difference for me. But for Allen, like he would be a guy. Like if you're in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, I think his value is definitely higher. If you're in a 6-point per passing touchdown, again, I mean, we saw the progression as a passer, but still just 20 passing touchdowns. So, where does he cap out? Does he get much higher than that? I'll take a guy that isn't going to be as mobile, isn't going to get me the rushing touchdowns, but is going to throw the ball 550, 600 times. Because right now, like you could definitely flip Allen for Goff in a piece more than likely, like those types of deals. Like I don't mind going out and just getting the guy putting up big numbers, as far as through the air and not really getting it done on the ground if it's a 6-point per passing touchdown league. So that would be a difference for me. I would definitely lean more towards the sell in that scenario.
And I like the fact that on his rush per game, they actually, trimmed it back a little bit. He had 90 as a rookie. He had 110 last year. But man, that's a nice little floor. And, so far it's been consistent. 8 touchdowns in his rookie year, 9 touchdowns last year. And it really has taken a big impact on his running backs, which this year is going to be Devin Singletary and Zach Moss. Now, Devin Singletary, because of the addition of Moss, he is a buy for me because his stock is down. I like buying things when they're depressed. I don't think it really is going to change too much. Again, this team rushed the ball for 465 times. So even if you were to, for some reason, take Josh Allen to 165, that still leaves 300 for Moss and Singletary to use. My issue with these guys is Frank Gore, who was there last year, who they say is the role Zach Moss is going to take, and then Singletary from last year, they had 2 touchdowns each, and Josh Allen had 9. So when they're in around goal line, it's like old school back in the day Cam Newton. And, that's really going to have an impact on these running backs. But I do like Devin Singletary. I think he's going to be the goal line, and I would say the red zone back. Maybe not the goal line back. That's the wrong terminology. The red zone back. The guy from the 20 into the goal line. I think he'll get more of the PPR work. I wasn't big on Zach Moss coming out of school. I know Jerry, the normal man of the hour co-host with the Power, was a fan, but I'm selling. He may get Frank Gore's 166 attempts last year. Let's see what he does with him. If he's not getting any passing volume, and there's only a handful of rushing touchdowns, how much volume could he really generate for your dynasty roster? So where are you at with these two guys, Moss and Singletary?
Yeah, well, real quick, I want to know for Singletary, were you a sell before the draft? Because I think his value definitely flipped from like people were like, I don't know, even though he's the lead back, like that was kind of people were selling him, and now that he's in this situation where they added a mouth, kind of more where you are. So were you selling before but buying now?
I was holding before and buying now. I've always liked this guy. I like this guy coming out of college. I hate to use the generic, he's just a football player, but that's what he is to me. He only started 8 games last year. And, his touches, if you add in his targets, he had almost 200 total touches on the season. So, you're looking at 15, 16, touches a game.
Yeah.
That's going to produce enough volume to make him RB2 worthy. And I do believe he's going to be, like I said, he averaged about 3.5 targets a game, which is more than Joe Mixon, who everybody loves. He rushed for 775 yards. Yeah. The touchdown volume bothers me, but if you were counting on him to be a high-end RB2, you were already barking up the wrong tree. So for me, he's everybody's down on him, and for that reason, I like to buy him. And then Moss, the value's creeping up, and I was never in to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Singletary before. They were always going to add somebody. Like it's so funny when you're on Twitter and stuff, and like somebody signs someone like, oh my gosh, going to crush this guy. Like teams don't go in with just one guy. No one is ever going to go in and get 80% of the work type of thing. Like those guys are rare, far and few between. And when there was a situation like a player like Singletary, they're not going to run him out there for 300 carries a year. So Moss didn't worry me there. I like Singletary before. I like him even more now. If you can, like you said, it's perfect. He's a guy that's going to be, in my opinion, a really solid, middle to low end running back too. The touchdowns will always kind of keep him in that range. I don't think he has like RB1 upside as an example. I don't think he'll ever pop and even have one of those, big years that, he somehow gets, 12 touchdowns. I just don't think that's going to happen. But if you're treating him for how he is, he was on a 200 carry pace last year because he only played 12 games. That was his pace. But what if you look at it, they didn't really use him at all. And then in the second half of the season, he was 14 carries a game, weeks 11 through 16. And he had 2 games over 20 carries. He's not a prolific pass catcher, but I do think that he's going to be somewhere in that 10 to 12 carries a game, which is solid. He catches the ball enough, like you alluded to. It's really just the touchdowns, and that's going to hamper him a little bit. It's going to keep him in that running back 2 range, but I'm okay with that. So I'm willing to buy Singletary, especially if someone's down on him with the addition of Moss. For Moss, I'm with you as well. I don't think that he's a guy that scares me much. If this was a normal offense that didn't have a quarterback snagging 7 to potentially 10 rushing touchdowns from this team, then yeah, I'd probably like Moss a little bit more. But he's in a role that's going to be, that's going to be reduced due to the fact that Josh Allen is such a good goal line back for the most part. That's pretty much what he is when he gets down there. So Moss for 2020, I don't mind it because I think he's going to get some work. So from a volume standpoint, or if you are in a league that rewards first downs or carries or what have you, I picked him up in a keeper league pretty much for this year on keeping him cheap, and I was fine with that. I'm not investing with him. If you had to spend a pick and somebody is hot for him, good riddance. See ya. I'm even fine if I picked him up in a late second and I get next year's late second. I don't mind making that swap. He's just somebody that doesn't excite me. So I think I'm with you across the board there. I really like Singletary, though. I think a lot of people are down on him for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, let's switch over to the wide receivers. I'm going to start with the guys that really don't mean a whole lot for Dynasty to begin with. Your boy,
Robert Bob Foster.
Your boy, former rapping cowboy Cole Beasley, who didn't have a horrible season last year in the offense. John Brown, who was a wide receiver too, a top 24 play on this offense, and then Gabriel Davis, the rookie. Now, Davis is the tallest member of the wide receiver core. He's 6'3", and these other guys are between 5'8" and 6'1". So he could get a little red zone work as a rookie. If you're looking for like that dart throw in a best ball dynasty or in a seasonal best ball league, like in that last round, throw Gabriel Davis on the back end of your roster as opposed to the corpse of Larry Fitzgerald. Love Larry. Larry's good people.
Yeah,
he can come over and hang out and come over to a barbecue or something. But I mean, he's passed the AJ Packs by a career at this point. So these young guys, Brown, I think he had over 100 targets last year, and Beasley had right in that neighborhood. And I think that's coming down because the guy I really want to talk about, the guy whose stock is down but I'm buying, is Stephon Diggs. He went in the 8th round of the Scott Fish Bowl. A full 3 rounds over the guys that, he's put up similar numbers to, like Odell Beckham Jr. Diggs was the wide receiver 24 last year. Odell Beckham was the wide receiver 25. And he had a career high in receiving yards with 1,130, but he only had 94 targets and 63 receptions. 63 receptions was like the 3rd lowest of his career. He had over 100 the year before, and he was in a real low volume passing offense. And I just don't understand why people are down on him. Do you remember when the Buffalo Bills in the same front office and coaching staff traded for Antonio Brown 2 years ago?
Dude, that was a glorious 36 hours.
The coldest 36 hours of Antonio Brown. That's how he froze his feet initially, by the way.
It's gotta be.
He was walking through a Best Western parking lot in Buffalo, New York, froze his feet. He just kept that on the down low until he got to Oakland last year. And then this year they go out and give a first and a little bit plus to get Stephon Diggs. What does that tell me? What it tells me is this is a team and a coaching staff that is willing to deal with a diva wide receiver. And if you are bringing in a diva wide receiver who wants touches, who wants volume, that tells me they're prepared to give him what he wants because they know that he'll pout, he'll post mysterious tweets on Twitter, he'll post pictures of him in another team's jersey and gear. And no head coach, Sean McDermott, I think, is one of the brightest young head coaches in the league. And you do not bring in a guy like Stephon Diggs. You don't attempt to bring in a guy like Antonio Brown unless, A, you are prepared to satisfy that personality. It's just facts. Number 2, you know that you would have a game plan for him. You know how you're going to have Josh Allen use him. So I think this is bad news for John Brown if you were looking for that, that COVID depth, that guy who was a wide receiver too, because to get Diggs the 100, he had 94 targets last year and was pissed off in Minnesota. You're going to have to give him 120, 125, and that's going to come at someone's expense. And I think it's going to be a big chunk of the volume from Beasley, a big chunk of the volume from John Brown. So that forces all those guys not named Stephon Diggs down, but Diggs is a buy. People hate him right now. There could be a bit of Diggs fatigue. I think he's got 5 years in the league. He's going into his 6th year. People are always looking for the new hotness, and they've already assumed that Stephon Diggs is old and busted. That's a great line from the movie Bad Boys. The new hotness, old and busted. Old and busted. Old and busted. And I will gladly take Stephon Diggs because much like Marquise Brown, if you can get him as your wide receiver 3 and you're stacking him with a Tyreek Hill and maybe an Allen Robinson, and he's your 3rd because you could trade for him cheap, that guy can win you weeks. And if you've already got a good wide receiver 1 and 2 in front of him, and people are, I don't want to say giving him away, but you could easily work some deals out there for Stephon Diggs. I'm out there looking for cheap shares myself. What about you, Kyle? Where are you at with this receiving core? And then let's focus a little bit on Diggs.
New hotness, old and busted. Was that Bad Boys or was that Men in Black?
Oh, that was Bad Boys for sure.
Oh, okay. I thought that line might have been in Men in Black too.
The new hotness, old and busted. I'm old and busted. The fantasy football smackdown, the new hotness. All right, give me the new hotness.
So I think as far as what you said with the other receivers, Beasley was a sneaky deep league play. I think that does go away. There's sure as hell not enough volume for 3 of these guys to be fantasy relevant. So unfortunately, you got to slide him away only in the deepest of leagues. If you want to keep him on the bench, see how this thing plays out, obviously that's fine. But I think you're right there. Got to just put him away. John Brown, funny enough, I was looking at this. I don't remember if this is half point. So John Brown and Stephon Diggs finished back-to-back last year. And John Brown is definitely somebody that I think is going to take a hit. 115 targets, just over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. The talent's always been there. It was awesome to see him put a year together. He was super cheap going into last season, so a lot of people, enjoyed having him on the roster. But I do think that, they paid the price. They brought him in. They were looking for an alpha receiver. Even like you mentioned with Antonio Brown, they have that in Stephon Diggs. So I do think that, both Brown and Beasley are going to take a hit. Brown's still playable and somebody that you still tack on to as a, a bye week guy, deeper league flex candidate. Totally. I'm fine with that. I still think he's going to be somewhere close to 90 targets, which is still somebody that is worth having on your team. And he's probably even cheaper than what he's going to be able to return this season. So I'm okay either, holding on or acquiring Brown on the cheap. Stephon Diggs is somebody that, man, I have traditionally you mentioned Diggs fatigue. He's always just bugged the hell out of me. He was a guy that just never, for me, lived up to the hype from a fantasy perspective. I'm not a tape guy. Like I'll obviously say that, but he's always been hyped as like a precision route runner. And he's a top end wide receiver and the talent's there and all that. But from a fantasy perspective, I was like, it never correlated. And some of that was just due to the fact that he, outside of 1 year, he's never really been in a high passing volume offense. Well, he got pissed off, like he said last season. And now he moves into an offense that barely threw the ball more than what they were doing last year in Minnesota. I think it was about 14 more pass attempts. And even though Josh Allen did play 1 more game, he actually only had 5 passes in week 17. So they were pretty much the exact same. I think that Diggs, as far as if I guess I haven't seen his where he's going currently as far as value goes. If you can buy him at a reasonable price with the idea that he's going to turn in a low end wide receiver 2 season, I'm in. Like, I think he's going to be the alpha in this offense. I think 110 to 115 targets is definitely reasonable. That's what John Brown did last year. I wouldn't expect much more than that. I would definitely not paying the price of someone thinking they're going to get top 12 or even 15 wide receiver value back for him. I would rather have a guy that maybe isn't as talented, but is in an offense that's going to throw the ball 600 times. There's going to be offenses that throw the ball 150 to 170 more times than this offense in Buffalo. So if the price is reasonable now, I'm on board. Let's see it, man, because I love the fact that he is a super talented guy, and we've seen it in 1 year where he had a really high volume, but that's the only way I'm getting him. I think he's going to be right about what he was last year, which was about 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think that's a pretty good number to target for this season. So that's the price. If I can get him, buying him. Otherwise, I'm still out. I'm still going to let somebody else chase that dream.
I think he'll get a little bit more. I think Smokey Brown will play more of that decoy role. And I could easily see this guy getting 130 targets, maybe 80 catches, 1,200 yards, and the 6 touchdowns sounds right. Mm-hmm. But I see him being like a wide receiver 15 to 18 overall in the season. A little bit better than he was last year. but not tremendous. All right, real quick, we'll go with Dawson Knox. I like the guy. I'm intrigued. He's a guy that I don't mind having a share of, but I want to see how he matures in year 2. And because most dynasty taxi squads are 2-year propositions, I'm just going to throw him on there. If you're counting on Dawson Knox to put up big PPR and fantasy points in your tight end premium, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. But why not just leave him on your taxi, see what you have? And on this offense as a whole, I'm slightly up. I think the passing volume will have to go up a little bit. Miami will be better. New England just got better with Cam, we think. The Jets should be better as long as Sam Darnold's not out there getting any more communicable diseases. So overall, I could see this team, being required to score a few more points. And if that happens, I think it will raise the team slightly. Kyle, are you up, down, or neutral on the
Yeah, I think, and as much as I kind of poo-pooed some of like Diggs and maybe, I am down a little bit on Allen. I think overall I'm up though, because I like Singletary's value in his sophomore season. I think he's definitely going to be there. I like the idea of Diggs and Brown compared to what we saw last year from Diggs and Beasley. So while, Allen was definitely, a breakout candidate, from just putting a full 16 games, solid year, top 10 quarterback, regardless of scoring. I do think he might regress a little bit overall just because of the rushing touchdowns maybe not being there. But I think overall, man, I'm up. I think you're looking at 4 pretty decent options. I don't know if there's a 1 there maybe necessarily in any of them, maybe Allen, but I think you got you got 4 pretty decent options, at least 3 2s and a flex.
All right, let's go to some more new hotness. Let's go to the Arizona Cardinals with the new hotness in Kyler Murray.
Yep.
And head coach Cliff Kingsbury. This team finished 17th last year in points per game, 22.6 points. The Action Network over and under number is 7. If I was betting this one, I would bet the under. I think this team is worse than that, and I think they play in the toughest division in football. Now, they are returning 76.6% of 2019's offensive snaps. That's 19 most in the league, so kind of there in the middle. They ran the 22nd most plays in the NFL last year, which was 1,000. I was actually expecting a lot more due to all the talk of Cliff Kingsbury and his pace of play, but they were 22nd for 1,000, 21st in total yards for 54.67. They were 18th in pass attempts with 554, 24th in passing yards with 34.77. Rush attempts, they were 19th in rush attempts with 396, so not even 400 total attempts, but they were 10th in rushing yards, and that's what happens when your quarterback has around 500 on his own with 1,990, so just shy of $2,000. Who's new? There's only really a couple of big names here. DeAndre Hopkins is in. David Johnson's out. And Kyle, let's talk about a guy that just adds an R to your last name. Let's talk about Kyler. Up, down, neutral.
Yeah.
You buying, selling. Give me some power.
He's a guy that I think his numbers are, they're going to improve. He's going to progress. But man, he has freaking skyrocketed into that top 5 discussion. And for me, I mean, give me Russell Wilson. I mean, and he's a guy and sometimes I think the consensus top 3 right now, obviously got Mahomes. He earned himself a little bit of money this week. Lamar Jackson, Dak has definitely been up there. He's been getting a lot of hype that his success can continue from last year. And then it's kind of, Watson with age, and then he's usually in that top range too. And then Kyler. I know Wilson's 31, but in quarterback years, it's just not the same. Wilson does it every single year. He's super consistent. I think he's going to just continue to put up these numbers, at least for the foreseeable future. I like Kyler Murray. I have on a couple squads. It's fun owning the guy. I do think his numbers are going to go up, but I guess I'm down on him compared to the consensus right now because I wouldn't put him in my top 5. And he's just somebody that kind of similar to what we've been talking about. And maybe that's just quarterback in general. If I can get a little bit of value from him and take half a step back, I'll do that. And I'm going to do that with Kyler Murray. He's definitely outpriced himself, early in the offseason or right after the end of the year. Everyone's like, all right, Mahomes was a late pick in redraft. Now he blew up. And Jackson was a late pick. Now he blew up. And those were league winning quarterbacks. But they were league winners because you drafted them late. Everybody pointed to Kyler because he was on that same narrative street, sophomore quarterback coming in. They added a big weapon now and everything. But now I think he's going to be priced just a little bit too high for me. I'm going to have to go with Old Faithful most of the time over Kyler in redraft. And in Dynasty, he's not in my top 5. So I'm going to go with a sell on Kyler Murray.
I'm along the same lines. I'm going to sell at his current ADP. Now, actually, he's the QB3 in most startups.
Oh, bullshit.
But for me, he has fallen back to he's in a battle for fifth with Carson Wentz. The more that I think about this offense, the more trepidation creeps in, man. I'm telling you, if you're drafting him as QB3, and what are you foregoing in that round to take him that high? I would much rather have Deshaun Watson. I would much rather have Dak. Dak is my QB3. He's pretty much locked in. As long as Dak's a Cowboy with Kellen Moore calling plays and Mike McCarthy as the head coach. Yeah, and those weapons, he's locked in. He's locked in as my QB3 behind Lamar, behind Mahomes. Then for Deshaun Watson, I'm taking the track record because it's like no one. It's like on Twitter, everybody is the eternal pessimist and everything sucks and everyone's making bad decisions.
Yes.
Except on dynasty players. We only see Kyler having a better year. Man, this has Baker Mayfield deja vu written all over it. The guy who had a good rookie season, who gets a superstar wide receiver traded into the team, he can't miss. I remember this time last year, I was telling people, man, you can't take Baker Mayfield second overall as the QB2. And they're like, nah, it's going to be magical. Guys, sometimes things just don't work out like you think they're going to. And I got news for you. I was going to save it to the end, but his head coach was 35-40 at Texas Tech in the Big 12. He was 8-5 his first campaign. Then he was 4-8, 7-6, 5-7, 6-7, 5-7. His offenses ranked in those 6 years were 23rd, 55th, 2nd, 5th, 24, and 16. And then he got fired from his alma mater, okay? You're not selling me Andy Reid here, guys. You're not even selling me Bill O'Brien. So as good as things have gone, you're buying Kyler Murray right now at what could be his apex. They use Kyle, you're in the mortgage generation business and things like that for your real job. And how I'll use a term that you're probably familiar with. How many dynasty owners are upside down on Baker Mayfield based on where they drafted him last year?
Yes, sir.
And like I like to joke around about Baker Mayfield, he's the only QB2 that you can get for QB1 prices. Most people love him. And based on where Kyler's Murray, I like the talent, I like the upside, I like the weapons. But based on where his ADP is and what his cost is right now, for me, he's a no thank you.
Yeah,
I would much rather have a much more stable Wentz, Dak, Lamar, all those guys. So for me, he's actually trending backwards. So I think we're in the same boat there with him. Let's talk about these running backs. Now, Kenyon Drake, I couldn't give him away in the one league you and I were in together last year. He's a stock up for me in redraft because he was hand selected to be the man. But if you're not a contender, you need to be selling because he's only on basically a 1-year contract. Now, what are you selling him on? The fact that he had 3 games of 28 or more PPR points in this offense last year, and 4 of his 8 games were 17 or more PPR points as a Cardinal. Obviously that they want him there. They're paying him about $8 million, but for me, he's a sell unless you are a legit contender and he's a piece of your championship winning roster. Also on the roster, Chase Edmonds. Now, I got Chase Edmonds. I'm going to hold him because he's still the guy who's an injury away. In the past, he was a David Johnson injury away. Now he's a Kenyon Drake injury away. And a guy that I'm fascinated with because he was going dirt cheap in rookie drafts is Eno Benjamin. So if you can get those, I would rather have those 2 guys, usually in a running back, backfield like this that's kind of attached to a buzzworthy or hot team. I would much rather have the cheapest option. And in this case, that would be Eno Benjamin. I'm not necessarily throwing Kenyon Drake down the street, but if I can get out for him, man, I think you could probably get a 2021 first for him. I can't guarantee that, but it would be a contender's first. So you're looking at like 109 through 112. Mr. Kyle, give us something on this backfield.
Yeah, man, this one was really interesting. I mean, Drake, obviously, I turned down so many trade offers. People were trying to, and I'm like, no, especially after that San Fran game, he got traded. Everyone's trying to ride that news, and he busts out. I think he was on the team for like 3 days, maybe, and then he's playing on Thursday Night Football and putting up the big numbers. Everyone's watching, 100-yard touchdown. I turned down trade offers left and right. Obviously, one was a league winner because he had the biggest games of week 15, 16 last year, and then they bring him back. You were on it though, man. You said it last year. They weren't going to give up a draft pick for a guy that was going to be a rental. They were going to make sure that he was there in 2020, and here he is, and his value is much higher than anyone expected this time a year ago. As far as for Dynasty, though, I think you're spot on. I think this is kind of a 1-year thing. I'm not even on top of that. It's not like he's a guy that has a track record and he has 1 year left. This is a guy that's still a little bit of an unknown. He had 3 really, really big games, but he really had some poor games as well. I think this is a team that is going to be having to, rely on the passing game more than the run. I think that's pretty easy to say. I think that Drake is somebody that definitely has value for 2020, but if you're looking to sell high, this is your opportunity. So for redraft leagues, and if you're focusing just on 2020, for me, he's kind of a middle to low end RB2 with some risk there. But beyond that, man, I think you just kind of get out from under him and take advantage of the fact that he's on your team at the exact perfect time to sell.
He is a guy that has been in the league for now 4 years and has never had more than 170 carries. And now we're just going to automatically plop him into a high volume offense, and all of a sudden he's just good for 20 touches a game. That would be 20 touches a game would be almost double any one season that he's ever had. Go ahead.
I just think the other thing, the last point, I guess, is that if he didn't have the reception prowess that he does, like I think he is somebody that can get you 50 to 60 catches. That helps for sure. Like that gives you a little bit of protection. But yeah, dude, it's a little scary when you're looking at some of the prices that he's going for right now and like startups and those types of things, because he could be exactly where he was a year ago, just turn into a pumpkin, when we're talking here next July,
You sure do love pumpkins, Cotton. All right, well, let's go to a guy that I am sure is going to turn into a pumpkin, at least from a dynasty value standpoint, and that's DeAndre Hopkins. He's a stock down sell for me. I continue to see him go in second round ADP and Superflex startups, and I've seen him kind of round the turn in 1 QB startups, and I just don't get it. This is a guy for the last handful of years. So if you throw out the 91 targets he had in his rookie year, over the next 6, he's averaged 160. And I just don't see it. The leading receiver on this team last year was Uncle Larry, who had 109 targets, and Christian Kirk had 108. And this was a team that only threw the ball 554 times. So if you give him his career average of 160, you're just going to automatically come in here and give him 30% target volume. I just don't see it. I mean, I'm sure he and Kyler have had a few practice sessions, but I just see a guy who just turned 28 in June, whose volume is probably going to get cut by 30%. And you're like, holy shit, Memphis, 30%. That's a lot. Yeah, that's 48. That's 48 targets a season. And then now he's down, and that puts him around like 112. If he was between the 110 and 120 this year, I'm not going to be stunned. And without that volume, he's going to come way down. And then what are you left with? You're left with an asset next year that all the age mongerers that are fearful of those guys, he's going into his age 29 season. He just had his worst, season since his rookie year and blah, blah, blah. And you're just going to have an asset that has value tanking. And where he's going in ADP, he is someone that if I can work one of those mega blockbusters and work him in as one of the mega blockbuster pieces on my side, and I would like to take like a middling running back. This is just as my head's going. Give me a middling running back in DeAndre Hopkins, and I will send you that for Allen Robinson and like a Jonathan Taylor. I think Allen Robinson will outperform DeAndre Hopkins as soon as this year, and then you can get the better running back asset. So that's what I'm looking to do. I don't like him. The rest of these guys, man, Larry Fitz, he's Larry Fitz. If you need 109 targets, Larry's your guy. The guy that I'm fascinated with, because people continue to like him, is Christian Kirk.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And
I don't either, thank God. Someone else.
And sometimes I get that I don't get it. But in this case, I don't get what I'm not getting. I mean, this is his going into his 3rd year in the league, 4th year in the league.
3rd year, yep.
And they were so high on him of handing him the torch over to Christian Kirk that they went out and traded for DeAndre Hopkins. Now, they did get him for a bag of peanuts and a ham sandwich, but that's neither here nor there. They could have paid more. It's not what they paid, it's who they got. And they're getting ready to give him a truckload of money. He being DeAndre Hopkins is on the last year of his deal. And then they went out last year, so after taking Christian Kirk, the following year they went out and drafted Andy Isabella, Hakeem Butler, Keyshawn Johnson or
Yep.
Davis. Yeah. So They just continue to add and add and add to the wide receiver room.
Mm-hmm.
I think they see Christian Kirk as part of the offense. I just don't think they see him as a big part of the offense. So he's a guy that I'm looking to get out of right now on name value alone. So for me, I'm down on everybody. If I was in a best ball and I could get some cheap Andy Isabella as like my last pick on a potent offense on the team that ran the most 4 wide receiver sets in the league last year, what the hell? But from a wide receiver standpoint, I want none. So what about you, Kyle?
I'm definitely with you on Kirk. I don't get it with this guy. I have a few shares of him, and like I want to trade him away, but like I'm afraid that like he's a guy that I think I'm gonna move for I won't get full return only because my offers are gonna not give me what I should get, right? Like I just have such a hard time seeing it, like where other people are valuing him. And I had him. I liked, the idea again of him eventually being the guy once Larry moved on. Larry's not moving on, and then before that happens, they bring in Hopkins. So I don't get it with Kirk either. I don't think he's a guy that's ever going to be, a wide receiver 2. It's going to be interesting to see this offense in his second year. Do they continue to spread the ball around or not? As somebody that in a startup with you, I traded up for a early second at like the 202. And I took DeAndre Hopkins because of a PPR league, and I really wanted to. I paired him up with Devontae Adams. I was super pumped. And then like a week later, I'm like doing more research to kind of digging into it. That startup was a little bit earlier in the off season before I started really diving into numbers. And I'm like, damn it. I don't know if I like this pick anymore. I'm with you. I'm scared. I would be concerned about that. The age thing you said, he's going to be real close. When people start seeing that 29 on him, it's going to be harder to get value for him. I don't think he's going to get that 150 targets. I do think that it balances more to an alpha versus what we saw last year with an almost direct split between those two wide receivers in Arizona. I think he's going to be closer to 120 is probably a little bit safer, but that's not DeAndre Hopkins numbers. That's not what we saw. So I'm down across the board for sure. I find it a hard time liking any of these guys at their current values. It's concerning to me, especially as a Hopkins owner now. It was the first time I've owned Hopkins, and I'm already wanting to get the hell out before we even played a game.
Yeah, and we won't cover much of Dan Arnold, the tight end. I think they called him the mailman in New Orleans where he was at last year because he's just basically a nondescript dude hanging out on the team. Couldn't pick him out of a lineup.
Hey.
But I want to get back to this team before we wrap this one up. It's just like this is a team like I was avoiding the Cleveland Browns last year. I did get some cheap Kareem Hunt because everybody was down on him. And I've always liked the talent with Kareem Hunt. I like Nick Chubb, but in fairness to him, his value has kind of like stayed the same. He's not went way up. He's not went way down. I would love if it went down because I would go out and try to acquire some more, Nick Chubb because I love him quite a bit. But overall, I like to fade the steam because you're not buying any equity. Give me the upside play. Give me the guy. Give me the Josh Allen as a rookie in the third round. Don't give me Baker as the 101 in a rookie superflex. Don't give me Kyler as the 101 in a superflex. Give me the value. I think all of these guys are priced right around their ceiling, whether it's Drake, whether it's Kyler, whether it's Hopkins. And I think you're going to be losing equity. You're going to be underwater, to use that term again. One thing I did learn tonight with looking at Kenyon Drake's, history of touches, and he's not been the healthiest guy around. I am going to pick up some late Chase Edmonds in the old Scott Fish Bowl.
There you go.
I kind of smell success. So there we go. I'll just ask you real quick: up, down, or neutral on this offense?
Down. I'm with you.
100%.
Everybody's peaking. I can't believe that QB3 for Murray. Like he can't. There's nowhere to go but down for him, dude.
I don't trust him.
Yeah.
I want to see 2 to 3 years of sample size.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly what I'm getting with Carson Wentz, and I know the injury risk is baked into his cost. So I'll gladly take Carson Wentz. I'll gladly take Dak because Dak's always been a QB1. I've had 4-year sample size of it. So with this guy, his coach, handsome as a sumbitch, but you know what? That doesn't
kick-ass living room,
state of the art, postmodern, but. The whole thing, it just feels like you're buying steam, and steam evaporates into the ether, and so will a lot of dynasty value here. So
that was the Science Corner, brought to you by Memphis.
Right, yeah. Memphis Nye, the science guy. All right, Kyle, let's take this one in. We're obviously up late. We're obviously tired. We're going to take this one in for a landing. Real quick, remind us about the SmackDown, man. I know you're getting ready to go on a little bit of a vacation, a little bit of a break, but I'm sure you'll be back with more kick-ass guests soon.
Yeah, I already got our buddy G lined up for next week's episode, so you got to tune into that. Anytime one of the Aussies swings by any podcast, you got to be there. So gonna be dropping shows continuing every Tuesday. Right now, I've been doing the show as a solo host, but bringing on guests every single week. So that's been a ton of fun. So check out the Fantasy Football Smackdown wherever you find podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter. I haven't got creative yet with my Twitter handle change, but it's just still Kyle FF Fellas. So appreciate it if you check out over there. I write for Fantasy Pros and Richards here and there, so that's a lot of fun. But definitely check out the podcast, and you can follow the show handle at FF Smackdown Pod. And of course, I'm sure Memphis already mentioned it, but you got to get in on the DK Metcalf jersey raffle, man. So 5-star reviews across the board here and at the SmackDown will get you in. And man, it's been fun at off season, but I'm ready for some football. I'm looking forward to that calendar flipping to August.
Yeah, for sure. So unless you're deaf in both ears, and I don't know why you'd be listening, you can tell this guy knows his football, knows his stuff. He is a great asset to the WaRzONE team. And much like Dr. Kyle, this Kyle is firmly on there. Just want to remind you real quick, next Tuesday, be looking for that Scott Fishbowl draft recap. My league should easily be done. Try to get Jerry on here. I'm working on trying to get a couple of the heavy hitters from the G.I. Joe division to pop in and just talk a little redraft Scott Fishbowl with us. We'll be back next Friday with another 3-team parlay and a special guest. We'll be talking Chiefs, Packers, and Bengals. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on all of your podcast platforms. Just when you go to hit pause and wrap this one up, just hit subscribe. We'll be in your ears every Wednesday and Friday, as well as all those new shows we talked about. Check out the Patreon. There's a direct link in the show description of this podcast. It's an easy one tap, takes you right to it. Same with the Trophy Smack link. So you can check those out. And on behalf of Kyle, I am Memphis. And here at the Dynasty WaRzONE, we are just trying to make the world a better place for fantasy football. We'll see you back here for another 2 shows next week, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Well, there you go, Mr. Kyle. We are at 71 minutes on the design.
There you go. That works, man.
All right, buddy. I am going to end this podcast. Goodbye, YouTube audience, for those that will listen later.
Nice.
And